This is the Turtle Beach Stealth Pivot. I've been putting in a lot of time testing it, so is it good for fighting games? Let's talk about it. It comes in this box right here. Here's the controller. We'll talk about this in a bit. Pretty long cable, USB-A to USB-C. And you can also use this wireless dongle on PC. In terms of build quality, this thing is built really well. Look at this. And I think it looks pretty cool. Let's plug it in and I'll break it down for you. On the surface, this looks pretty normal, right? You got two sticks here, a D-pad, face buttons, we got a little screen here. So it's pretty typical. However, if you flip this around, you're gonna see two toggles right here. So let's switch this. And from this typical controller layout, check this out. Oh man, what does this look like to you? This is a 6-button fight pad. We've seen modular controllers before, something like the eSwap, right? Where you can take out the modules and switch the positions around. Or the Victrix controller, where you unscrew it and flip it around. But in my opinion, this guy has the best implementation of this that I've seen so far. I mean, look at this, it's just built in. You can just switch it around and it transforms from one layout to the next. How genius is this? And this is not just a gimmick, this is actually useful. If you play games like Street Fighter 6 or any 6-button fighter, you're gonna want to have a 6-button layout, right? And this controller allows you to do that. The one thing that I wish that these modules do is have labels on them of which direction to go, right? So you kind of have to guess where to press. Same thing with rotating the sticks here. You kind of don't know where to go. And I don't want to go too far where I break the stick. So I wish there's some arrows or some sort of labeling of where to twist. Alright, let's start with the thumbsticks. To allow this module to pivot and go all the way around, they need the stick to be as short as possible so that it'll go under and tuck it underneath. And to do that, you can spin this thing to the right and then it goes down. When I first unboxed this, I thought the shorter thumbsticks is going to be so good for fighting games, right? Because of the shorter travel distance. And while the sticks do work in this position, unfortunately, it's just not very accurate. You see how I'm holding down back? And he's not doing down back at all. Alright? In order for you to activate the diagonals on the shorter sticks, you gotta kind of yank it. Right? It's kind of like I have to yank it out of a socket. Like that. Which is very unfortunate. So if you do want to use the sticks, you gotta twist it to the taller position. See, now diagonal works. In terms of tension, this thing is really loose. This is probably one of the loosest sticks that I've tested. It's super light. They do rotate pretty smoothly though. And these also have Hall effect sticks on them, so they are anti-drift, which is pretty cool. The shoulder buttons and triggers are Xbox style. You can press it from the outside or the inside. You also have trigger stops here as well. With the trigger stops, just like on a lot of controllers, I prefer it to be all the way down. And this way, I feel like the timing is better with the face buttons. I feel that this allows me to press the trigger and one of the face buttons at the same time to do certain moves. So for example, if I want to do this, I can do it very consistently like this, but when it's locked, it's just not as consistent. You see that? I try to press it at the same time, but I feel this is too fast and it messes up with the timing with the face button. Alright, let's talk about the face buttons. The switches that they use on here feel like metal switches, kind of like on the Xbox. However, unlike on the Xbox, these guys are super heavy. I would say that these guys are twice as heavy as on the Xbox controller. When I first started using this controller, my arm got hella tired really quickly. But over time, you do get used to it though. I just wish that these are a little bit lighter. And the other thing is, these buttons are really small. Here are the buttons side by side. I would say these are about 75% the size of these buttons. And I guess they did that to fit the extra buttons in, but they're still pretty usable. Although the angle of these buttons are pretty steep, right? Because this is still retaining the diamond shape, and then they just added the 2 extra buttons up here. So you go from here all the way up here really quickly. On most 6-button controllers, you can see the angle are very slight. It's almost horizontal. And the other thing that you gotta get used to initially is that the A and the X buttons is pushed back. Normally, the A button would be up here, right? So this is A and X, and then Y, and then B. But because the extra buttons are here, these 2 buttons are pushed down where the stick would be, right? So you gotta get used to these buttons being shifted down. But over time, I got used to it. I have no problem with it. In terms of playing this claw, you would think this would be perfect, right? However, the handle gets in the way. And I have very long fingers, and I have trouble reaching the top buttons. So if you like to play claw, this is probably not the best controller for that. You also get 2 extra back buttons here. And I like the fact that they are integrated into the handle. I do wish that there are 4 of these though, instead of 2. So in Street Fighter 6, when I move back and I want to duck and block, I just press one of these, and then he goes to down back without moving my thumb over here, right? If I need some space, bam, block, go back, block. I also use this back button to do backdash in DOA 6. Look at this. And just like the rest of the switches, these guys are pretty heavy. Because of that, I'm not able to do my backdash as quickly as I want. It just requires a lot of effort. Alright, let's talk about the D-pad. There's 2 of them. Let's talk about this one first. The one down here where the Xbox position is. And just like the face buttons, the switches on this guy are pretty heavy. For motion inputs, both this guy and this guy are great. Now with the top one.
Come on, it's time to train.
Woo! Look at that. With both D-pads, I can do all of the motions super easily. And as you can see, this D-pad looks a lot like the hybrid D-pad on the Xbox, right? However, on the Xbox D-pad, you see the edges here are super sharp. And these things will dig into your thumb over time. Well, what do you notice here? The edges are rounded off. So you can play on this guy for a lot longer, and it's a lot more comfortable to slide your thumb around. But it's still super easy for you to do flick motions like this. I find that double quarter circle movements are so much easier to do on these D-pads. Check that out. No problem at all. Both ways. For the upper D-pad, I don't know what it is, and it could be just me, but I don't think so. This feels better. The switches on here feels lighter, and it's a lot more like the switches on the Xbox controller. It's just a lot more comfortable and more responsive because you don't have to press so hard to activate it each time. And fortunately for us, this is the configuration for fighting games. And if you're somebody who kind of switches back and forth between the D-pad and the joystick, unfortunately this D-pad is not as good. And I personally am one of those people who switch back and forth. Especially when I want to do 360 motions, I switch to the stick. But fortunately for us, to do 360 motions on this D-pad is also pretty easy. Look at that. Charge motion, super easy. And the surface on this D-pad is just super smooth. Right? You can glide around it so easily. Look at that, I just did a double slide. So if you're playing a game that has really strict input requirements, this bottom D-pad is not quite as good. Alright, so that's the third time in a row. But now when I switch to the top D-pad, check this out. It's just so much easier with this top D-pad for me. And part of it is because the switches on this top D-pad are just better. They're softer, they're more responsive. But I also think the positioning matters as well. Because it's higher up, it's just easier for you to hit the bottom button, right? When you slide it around. Whereas if the D-pad is down here, it's kind of out of the way. You gotta really make a conscious effort to kind of go all the way down and kind of stretch your thumb this way, right? So unfortunately for me, as much as I like to switch between the stick and the D-pad, this bottom D-pad is not doing it for me. And thankfully this top D-pad is just top notch. And diagonals on this D-pad is just fantastic because you really feel the grooves. If you want to do a diagonal, just place your thumb in between here. Double taps are super fast on here. Look at that, no problem at all. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. This top D-pad is just fantastic. This is one of the best D-pads that I've tested for fighting games. To map these buttons and also the back buttons, there's two ways to do it. One is directly on the controller. So you press this little plus sign here and you're going to activate this LCD screen. You use the slider here to slide back and forth. And let's do button mapping. You can only do one at a time, unfortunately. To remap it, just choose from the menu here. The other way to do it is to download this app right here from the Microsoft Store. It's called the Turtle Beach Control Center 2. You can update your firmware here. You can go to buttons and remap the buttons. There we go. You can also remap the D-pad to either the left stick or the right stick. And you have different functions here that you can remap to the slider. You can control the dead zone for the sticks. And you can also choose the response time for it too. It's kind of cool, right? Dead zone for the triggers. You can also turn on superhuman hearing for FPS. You can pick different EQ settings, RGB lighting here, and the level of rumble as well. And finally, let's get into the polling rate test. On wired, minimum I get 1.3 milliseconds, maximum about 12 milliseconds. Jitter is kind of high actually at 2.47 milliseconds. Average input delay 5.83, and the polling rate is about 171. And on wireless, the numbers are a little bit slower. Minimum 3.32, maximum about 12 again, and jitter is higher at 3.8. Average input delay is 7.85, and polling rate is a little bit slower at 127 Hz. So as you can tell, this controller is not the fastest in terms of polling rate, and the jitter is quite a bit higher than you would like. What this means is this controller in terms of performance is not as stable as some other controllers out there. And this is really too bad, right? With that being said though, during actual gameplay, you're probably not gonna notice it. Would it be better if the polling rate is like 1000? Absolutely, you betcha. But these numbers are not unplayable. Unlike on the Nintendo Switch here, look at these polling rates. 71 and 63, this is really slow. These numbers are on par, if not slightly faster than the official Xbox controller. So what I'm saying is, it's playable. It's not the fastest, but it's not the worst. And most of you will not notice it anyways. Alright, final thoughts. I just love this thing. I really do. This is just awesome. This right here, it's just so cool to me. This is one of the most innovative and creative things I've seen in controllers in a long time. And this upper D-pad here is just fantastic. It's great for 2D fighters and 3D fighters. And I love the fact that they rounded the edges here. That just shows you the attention to detail that went into creating this controller. Maybe for the next one, they can improve on the switches here and not make it so heavy, and also make the controller a little bit faster, have a higher polling rate. Also put 2 extra back buttons back here, make it 4 instead of 2. But taking it for what it is, this is one of my favorite controllers for fighting game this year. This is just a fantastic controller for fighting games. 2 thumbs up for me. Alright, hopefully you found the video to be helpful. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.